I remember standing in that tiny hallway, looking at my kids sleeping, and wondering how the hell I ended up here. For so long, my parents stayed married even though they were always at each other's throats. When I was about 11, they finally split up. Everyone assumed I'd be the kid begging for them to get back together, but I wasn't. I actually prayed for that divorce. I didn't want to grow up thinking fighting every night was normal. When they finally separated, I did something nobody expected. I chose to live with my dad. My mom had just switched churches and wanted me to convert too. But I'd already been raised Catholic baptism, communion, all that. Suddenly, she's Protestant and wants me to drop everything. It became this endless fight about what I should believe. It broke her heart when the court gave custody to my dad, not just for me, but for my two sisters too. But honestly, I think it saved her life. She went back to school, started working, finally got to build something for herself instead of being stuck in the kitchen cooking for everyone. My dad, he never once tried to keep us from seeing her. He bought a house just a couple blocks away from hers so we could go back and forth anytime we wanted. No court-ordered weekends, no, it's your mom's day. If I wanted to see her, I did. My dad was always there. He showed up to my gymnastics meets, my church events, every single thing. He wasn't perfect, but he never stopped being present. My mom was always the nurse, the caretaker when I got sick. But dad was the one who'd drive me anywhere at any hour. They were better apart. Together, they were miserable, always arguing, stressed out, yelling about dumb stuff. Looking back, my mom was drowning under the weight of being a stay-at-home mom. She'd hustle every Easter making chocolate baskets or selling homemade treats, but she always wanted more. That's why I tell people, I didn't grow up dreaming of staying home, scrubbing floors, and making dinner by 5 p.m. I didn't want that. I got that from her. Neither of us were built for that life. Society tells you that you should want it, that you should settle. But deep down, my mom was born to work, to study, to get out there. After they split, Dad stepped up even more. He did everything to make sure we never felt like we lost anything. He never badmouthed her, never made visits complicated. He was just there. That's what a dad should be, right? So when I think about the family I built later, the family I thought I had, I always come back to those memories. I always knew what I didn't want, but somehow I still ended up repeating history. And maybe that's the part that hurts the most. My teenage years felt like two different stories stitched together, the church girl and the rebel. For a while, I was that kid at every Sunday mass, helping out, trying to do everything right. But then I hit that age where you just want to get out, see the world, feel grown. That's when I met Daniel. I was 17, he was 26. He'd already been married once, no kids, just a failed marriage and a lot more life than me. I met him through a friend at a diner just off a highway in Ohio. Her boyfriend brought him along and he sat across from me with that easy grin like he'd seen it all and nothing could shock him anymore. Within weeks, we were inseparable. He asked me to be his girlfriend at a rundown strip mall, gave me a tiny silver ring like we were in some teen drama. 3 months later, I was pregnant. I remember staring at the test in my bathroom, my hands shaking so bad I almost dropped it. College plans? Gone. Fresh diploma hanging on my bedroom wall? Might as well have been toilet paper. I was just a kid who just had a baby with a man who could legally rent a car. Daniel did what good guys say they'll do. He went straight to my dad, shook his hand, and told him he'd take care of me and the baby. But he never asked me. He asked my dad, as if it was about them, not me. I told him I didn't want to get married. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But back then, a girl with a conservative family, a big pregnant belly, and no ring, that's all people needed to judge you. My dad tried to stand by me at first. He told me if I didn't want to marry Daniel, I didn't have to. But my aunts, my cousins, everyone said the same thing. He wants to marry you. He wants to do right by you. Don't throw that away. Nobody knew the real Daniel yet. They didn't see the cracks like I did. I remember when it really hit me, that he wasn't the man he pretended to be. I was about 6 months pregnant when I went to his place. We were living apart because I'd refused the wedding. I found him by his old desktop, slamming the keyboard shut when I walked in. Of course I snooped. And there it was, a chat with his buddy, mocking me. Can't come out tonight, man. She showed up with that big-ass belly again, like my pregnancy was a prison sentence for him. I should have walked away then, should have run. But 17-year-old me? I blamed myself. He called me immature. He wasn't wrong, I was a kid. He'd lived 10 more years, had an ex-wife, had a life before me. Who was I to question him? One night, I packed an overnight bag and wrote my dad a note. I need to clear my head. Don't worry. I wandered downtown Columbus, ended up sitting on the steps of a church in the freezing cold talking to a priest. I'll never forget what he said. The biggest waste of a sacrament is when people marry for the wrong reason. He told me I didn't owe anyone a wedding just because I was pregnant. It was the first time someone made me feel like I wasn't ruined. But reality doesn't care about what you feel. I went home. Daniel was waiting, furious that I'd read his messages, furious that I'd told my dad what I'd seen. Somehow, I was the villain for invading his privacy. That's how it started, the gaslighting, the guilt trips. If you've never been with someone like that, you'd be shocked how easy it is to believe it's all your fault. So I stayed. I thought maybe if I had the baby, he'd change. Maybe the reality of a little girl with his eyes would make him grow up. But all it did was lock me tighter in a cage I didn't even know I'd built for myself. The day my daughter was born should have been the happiest day of my life. I was just 18, lying on a stiff hospital bed in downtown Cleveland, staring at the stained ceiling tiles while my dad squeezed my hand. Daniel showed up straight from a night out, eyes red, reeking of whiskey and stale cigarettes. He held my hand like he was doing me a favor. My labor was complicated. I'd been leaking amniotic fluid for hours, and the first hospital didn't have a sterile operating room to do a C-section because of a bacterial outbreak. They put me in an ambulance and rolled me across town to another hospital. 2 days of induced labor, oxytocin drip after oxytocin drip, and my body still refused to open up. I was alone in that room, just me and the beep of the monitors. Daniel stayed in the waiting room, texting who knows who. He'd peek in, sigh like he was bored, then vanish again. When my daughter finally came, she was tiny, squalling, perfect, and the only thing that felt truly mine in that moment. The weeks that followed were the hardest. Any new mom knows that postpartum hits you like a truck, but add a partner who resents you for trapping him at home with a crying baby? It was a nightmare. I spent the early weeks living at Daniel's mother's house because my dad worked late and my stepmom couldn't help much. She fussed over me like a nurse, spoon-feeding me soup when I was too exhausted to lift my head. But every night, Daniel would find a reason to slip away. Just grabbing a drink with the guys, he'd mumble. He'd come home hours later, crawling into bed smelling like cheap beer and regret. When I moved back into my dad's place, I thought things would get better. I had my room, my crib, my safe space. But every fight with Daniel circled back to the same thing he'd swear he'd change, then slip right back into old habits. He'd accuse me of being too young, too naive, too clingy, and when I'd push back, he'd say I was the reason he felt trapped. We'd break up for weeks at a time. He'd pop up again the moment he heard I was doing better. Let's fix our family for our daughter. And like a fool, I'd let him back in. He knew exactly when to show up, when the loneliness hit, when the bills piled up, when the baby fever spiked at 3 a.m. When our daughter turned 1, I found out I was pregnant again. We weren't really together, just trying to make it work. The phrase, you tell yourself to feel less like a fool. This time, the pregnancy was brutal. I had hyperemesis, violent nausea that left me dehydrated and bedridden. I landed in the hospital more than once, hooked to IV bags and drifting in and out of sleep. I'll never forget him standing at the foot of my hospital bed, arms crossed, saying, "You're giving up. You're not fighting for yourself or the baby." As if I wasn't fighting with every dry heave, every sleepless night. He made it about him, how unfair it was that he had to sit in a plastic chair while I was dramatically sick. I used to think that if I could just be more patient, more forgiving, he'd see I was worth staying for. But what I learned, lying in that hospital bed, was this. Some people will never see your worth until you stop letting them drain you dry. By the time I got discharged, I knew I was never going to marry him in a church. Not for my parents, not for him, and definitely not for the baby. Deep down, I could feel it. I was already planning my exit. But first, I had to survive. When our son was born, I thought maybe, just maybe, Daniel would finally grow up. He was calmer during my second pregnancy, more present, more careful, at least on the surface. He'd rub my back when the nausea got bad. He'd run to the store for ginger ale and saltines. For a moment, I let myself believe we were becoming a family. But Daniel always had a way of turning moments of love into weapons. I remember lying on our old, sagging couch while he lectured me about being a good wife once we were officially together. He said, "You're not like your mom, right? You know how to keep a man happy?" It made my skin crawl. We didn't even have a proper wedding. We just moved into a cramped apartment a few blocks from my dad's house. No ring, no vows, just a handshake deal to pretend we were husband and wife. In the early days, I told myself I could live with that. After all, he was providing. He was working long hours at his auto shop, trying to build his next business. But providing came with strings. He controlled every dime. He'd brag to his family, "She doesn't need to lift a finger. I've got her." Meanwhile, I'd be dragging myself home from working late shifts at the mall, too scared to ask him for cab fare because I knew it would start a fight. Some nights I'd get off the bus and walk 3 blocks in the dark, clutching my keys between my knuckles, praying the drug dealers on the corner wouldn't notice me. One night, I came home shaking. Some guy had followed me from the bus stop, stumbling behind me like a ghost. I made it home safe, but when I told Daniel, he just laughed. "You're so dramatic. Nobody's gonna touch you." He didn't get up to get me from the bus. He didn't even walk me to the door. It was like asking him to protect me was a joke. I started to see the cracks in our life. He'd let me work just enough to pay my half of the bills, but not enough to feel free. He hated when I talked to my old friends, he'd say they were a bad influence. He'd scroll through my phone, demand to know why a male coworker liked my Facebook post. But his phone? Always face down. Always locked. And still, I stayed. Because we had 2 kids. Because I told myself he was a good dad. The kids adored him, the fun dad who'd let them stay up late, play soccer in the living room, sneak them candy behind my back. Meanwhile, I was the nag. The tired mom scrubbing crayon off the walls at midnight, picking up his dirty socks off the kitchen counter. My dad saw it all. He'd drop by with groceries when the fridge was empty, whisper, "When you're ready, you can come home." But I wasn't ready. Not yet. One night, I stood in that tiny kitchen, washing bottles while the kids giggled in the next room. Daniel sprawled on the couch, television blaring, beer in hand. I caught my reflection in the window hair pulled back, dark circles under my eyes, shoulders slumped like a defeated prize fighter. I asked myself, is this what love is supposed to feel like? That was the first time I let the answer be no. Things got worse before they got better. It was like Daniel could sense I was drifting, that I was done believing the fairy tale. He'd come home from the shop later and later. He'd disappear for a whole weekend and then show up with greasy fast food for the kids like nothing happened. One night, he left me at the ballet studio where I taught part-time. I was doing a late rehearsal with my students, and he promised he'd pick up the kids and be back before I finished. When I got home, the apartment was pitch black. I pushed the door open, heart racing, and there they were. My daughter 6 and my son 5 sitting alone on the floor, still in their school clothes. The takeout bag he'd promised, nowhere to be found. My daughter's eyes welled up when she saw me. "Mommy, Daddy said he'd bring burgers, but he didn't come back." My little boy just looked at me and whispered, "I was scared." That night, something cracked inside me. I called his parents in tears. His mother's voice was tight but resigned. "Honey, he's always been like this. Come sleep here tonight with the kids. We'll figure it out in the morning." It wasn't the first time they'd covered for him, but it was the first time I didn't make excuses. I packed pajamas, toothbrushes, and the kids' favorite blankets. I remember watching them sleep on that lumpy pull-out couch at his parents' house, thinking, they deserve so much better than this. Daniel showed up the next day, reeking of beer, begging for forgiveness. He knelt on the doorstep like some broken saint, crying about how he'd lost track of time. His dad pulled him inside, whispering, "Get your act together. You've got kids now." But deep down, I knew nothing would change. Then came the night he told me he'd been arrested. He called me at 2 a.m., voice slurred, ranting about some bar fight. He swore he was locked up, needed bail. I panicked, called my dad, who drove to the station in the middle of the night. But when my dad got there, the sergeant said no one named Daniel had been booked. It was just another lie, another cover for his weekend bender. When my dad got back, he sat me down at his kitchen table. He looked me dead in the eye and asked, "Do you want your kids thinking this is normal? Chasing their father through police stations at 3 in the morning?" That was the first time I admitted out loud that I didn't. I still see my dad's face in that moment, tired but steady. He didn't say, "I told you so." He just said, "You have a place here whenever you need it." I didn't move back that night, but the seed was planted. One day I knew I'd have to stop choosing this chaos for them and for me. After that night, it was like I woke up with new eyes. I started seeing all the things I'd ignored, the half-lies, the manipulation, the freedom he gave himself while chaining me to a life that made me smaller every day. I remember one night at the mall, I was working a late shift at the shoe store to help cover the bills because, of course, Daniel's shop wasn't making enough. It was almost midnight when I got off. I called him, begging him to pick me up from the bus stop. Our neighborhood was rough, and I hated walking alone. "No, can't do it," he said. "Figure it out. I'm not leaving the kids with your stepmom at this hour." So I walked, past the rows of shuttered stores, past the dark corners where men waited for their next hit. I held my keys like a knife, praying I wouldn't see anyone, but I did. One night, a man stumbled out of the shadows, mumbling. I froze. He got closer, too close. My knees buckled. By the time I got home, my jeans were damp. I'd been so terrified I'd wet myself. When I told Daniel, he laughed. He actually laughed. "You're such a baby. Nobody's gonna touch you. Next time, wear a diaper." He even taught the kids to joke about it, my little boy asked me, giggling, if mommy needed a pull-up for walks home. The humiliation was so sharp I thought it might split me in two. But the final straw, it was always the kids. It always came back to them. I'd stand at the stove after working all day, stirring sauce with one hand, holding my baby on my hip, my little girl tugging my sleeve for help with her homework. And there he'd be, sprawled on the couch, television blaring, scrolling through his phone. If dinner was late, he'd slam cupboards. If the food wasn't what he wanted, he'd pout like a child. And when I said I was exhausted, he'd throw it back. "You wanted to work, didn't you? Now you're too tired to be a wife." Pathetic. He didn't want a partner. He wanted a servant. He wanted his mother, but younger, prettier, obedient, and that would never be me. When the kids were finally asleep, I'd lie in bed and imagine a different life. Not a fairy tale, just an apartment where I didn't flinch when a door slammed. A place where I could breathe. Where my kids could grow up without thinking that a man yelling and drinking all weekend was just what dads do. It took years to build the courage. But night by night, small choice by small choice, I started making a plan. I started saving just enough for the what if. I started telling myself, I am more than this. My kids deserve more than this. And when the next storm came, I'd be ready. I wish I could say that once I made the decision to leave, everything got easier. It didn't. If anything, it got uglier, but it also got clearer. One night, Daniel stormed out again after one of our fights. He was supposed to take the kids for the weekend, his dad time. Instead, he vanished. No calls, no messages, just gone. My daughter, who was 6 then, asked, "Is Daddy buying us ice cream?" She sat by the window for hours, waiting for headlights that never came. I called his phone again and again, straight to voicemail. Finally, I tucked the kids into bed, and I did what I always did. I covered for him. "Daddy's busy, sweetheart. He'll be back soon." The next morning, I got a text. He'd been arrested, a DUI. I guess this time the party didn't end with him crawling back home to our clean sheets and warm dinner. This time he spent the night behind bars. And in some twisted way, it was like the universe grabbed my shoulders and screamed, "This is your life. This is what your kids are learning to accept." I packed an overnight bag for the kids and drove them to my dad's house. I still remember sitting on my childhood bed, my daughter asleep next to me, my son snoring at my feet, thinking, what are you doing? You promised yourself you'd never become your mother staying for the wrong reasons, teaching your kids the wrong lessons. The next morning, I looked my father in the eyes and said, "Dad, I'm done. I'm leaving him." And for the first time in years, my father didn't try to convince me to stay. He just said, "What took you so long?" But leaving someone like Daniel was never going to be a clean break. When he came home and found his key didn't work, he banged on the door until the neighbors called the cops. When the kids peeked through the window, he shouted, "Your mom's ruining our family." but they didn't buy it anymore. Even my son, just 6 years old, looked up at me and whispered, "Can we lock the door, Mommy?" Every time I tried to breathe, he'd find a new way to break me down. He'd show up at the kids' school unannounced, pretending he'd just come to see his babies. He'd text me at 2 a.m. "Nobody will ever want you with 2 kids." He'd post photos on Facebook with captions like, "My wife thinks she's too good for her family now." But what he didn't understand was that every petty move only hardened me more. Every door he kicked, every name he called me, every threat he hissed under his breath, it was just more proof that I was right to leave. And when the day finally came, when the papers were signed, when the locks were changed, when my kids finally stopped asking why Daddy wasn't home every night, I stood in my tiny apartment, surrounded by boxes and half-broken toys, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. It wasn't perfect, it was never going to be perfect, but it was mine, and it was enough. I wish I could say that the drama stopped once the divorce papers were signed. But for people like Daniel, the games never stopped, they just changed shape. He tried to hit me where he knew it would hurt most: money. The same man who once bragged about being the provider now claimed he was too broke to pay child support in full. He'd send half, sometimes less, always with a smug message attached: "Try working harder like I do." But it wasn't just the money. It was the emotional hooks, the manipulations, the constant power plays. When our son Liam developed that lump in his neck, I knew something was wrong. I pushed for tests, scans, second opinions. Daniel, he called me hysterical. He told anyone who'd listen that I was inventing illnesses because I was still obsessed with him. Meanwhile, I was losing sleep, sitting through doctor's appointments alone, taking notes while holding Liam's tiny hand. When the scans came back inconclusive, I felt this gut-deep dread, the kind only a mother understands. But Daniel refused to come to follow-ups. He'd text at the last second: "Got work. Can't make it. Stop exaggerating." When we finally got the biopsy done, the day felt like one endless, sterile blur. I sat in that cold hospital hallway while my baby was under anesthesia, staring at the wall, telling myself, "Be strong. Be strong. Be strong." I kept hearing Daniel's voice in my head, mocking me, telling me I was making it all up. Then the results came. Hodgkin's lymphoma. I swear, my heart cracked wide open. For a second, the whole world went silent. I thought about every time he called me crazy, every time he refused to show up, every time I fought alone. I texted him the news short and simple: "It's cancer." His reply: "You sure you didn't push for unnecessary tests? I bet it's nothing." He actually had the nerve to say that. And even then, he tried to look like the hero. He showed up at the hospital, posing for photos, hugging Liam for Facebook posts. But when it came to the night shifts, the hospital sleepovers, the chemo side effects, the fevers, he disappeared. Every time my son needed him, it was me sitting on that plastic chair, counting the hours, praying for the nausea to pass, wiping the sweat off my boy's forehead. Once, he spent one night at the hospital with Liam so I could shower and nap. The next day, he called me ungrateful. "You should be thankful I help at all. Most dads don't." But I didn't have time to fight him anymore. My energy had to go to Liam. To my daughter, who became my little sidekick, helping me disinfect every toy, every surface, because we couldn't risk an infection. To my job, the job that barely covered the bills but kept our lights on. And when the money ran low, when he started forgetting to send the full support, when he cut it in half because times are tough, I didn't have time to chase him down. I had kids to keep alive. So I did what moms like me always do. I figured it out. I sold things online. I tutored kids at night. I stocked my freezer with cheap meals and lied to my kids that ramen was fun food. And when Liam's hair fell out in clumps, I didn't break down in front of him. I told him superheroes don't need hair. Because if there's one thing Daniel taught me, it's that you can survive anything when you stop waiting for someone else to save you. The day Liam rang the bell at the cancer center, the whole hallway clapped. Nurses cried, strangers clapped him on the back. He was 7, but he stood there like a warrior who'd conquered the impossible. I held his hand and felt every ounce of rage, fear, and exhaustion melt into something new: relief, pride. I wish I could tell you Daniel changed when he saw his son beat cancer, that he realized what really mattered. But some people never change, they just find new ways to show you who they are. He showed up for the bell ceremony with balloons and that same smug grin. He posed for photos, acted like the world's greatest dad, then slipped away before the nurses could hand me the final bills. When the last payment for Liam's treatment came due, Daniel claimed he'd lost his job again. Just like that, the child support dried up the same month he posted photos of his new truck and a weekend trip with his girlfriend. It should have crushed me. It didn't. By then, I'd learned to see him for what he was, a lesson, not my lifeline. I found side gigs. I worked holidays, I cleaned houses on weekends. Some nights I went to bed so tired I didn't even dream, but my kids never felt it. They had food, they had love, they had laughter. They had me. And for the first time, that felt like enough. Funny thing is, Liam never talks about the cancer the way adults do. He calls it his superhero time. He brags about the costumes he wore to chemo, the nurses who cheered him on, the ice cream I let him eat at 2 a.m. because it was the only thing he could keep down. He doesn't mention the nights he fell asleep on my chest while I whispered that everything would be okay, maybe because for him it always was. And my daughter, my sweet girl who grew up too fast, she tells her friends, "My mom is the strongest person in the world." She doesn't know how many nights I sat on the bathroom floor, shaking with quiet tears so they wouldn't hear me. She only knows that I always showed up. These days, Daniel still tries his tricks. Half payments, petty excuses, the same old pity parties. But I've stopped waiting for him to be someone he's not. I have my kids. I have a new partner who shows up for me, for them who brings groceries instead of excuses, who laughs when I'm silly, who hugs me when I break. I used to think survival meant holding everything together, no matter what. Now I know survival means choosing better, saying enough when your heart can't take one more lie, trusting yourself to build a life where you don't have to beg someone to stay. So yeah, he lowered the child support while our son was fighting cancer. He left me alone in more ways than one. But in the end, he set me free. I didn't just survive him, I outgrew him. And that is the kind of ending I want my kids to remember. Not the heartbreak, not the chaos, but the moment we all walked away, stronger than we ever were before. There's a detail people rarely talk about when they hear stories like mine. What comes after the chaos? The mundane, everyday moments that used to feel impossible. Like paying a bill on time without begging for help, like taking your kids out for ice cream and not worrying if your card will decline. Like sleeping through the night because you know no one's coming home drunk at 3 a.m. to turn your world upside down. After Daniel left for good, I finally got to find out who I was without his shadow looming over me. I found out I love cooking late at night with music blasting in my tiny kitchen. I found out I love falling asleep on the couch with my daughter's feet on my lap and my son snoring softly in his superhero pajamas. I found out I am more than the worst things that ever happened to me. And life, as it turns out, is still hard. I still have to chase down late payments. I still get the occasional call from Daniel when he wants to stir up old drama. But his voice doesn't make my hands shake anymore. It doesn't ruin my day. He's just a voice on the other end of a line I don't even have to pick up. Liam's doing well. His hair grew back soft and fluffy, and he makes me promise every year that his birthday party will be the biggest, coolest superhero party ever. And you know what? It always is. Because he deserves it. They both do. Sometimes I catch my reflection in the mirror, older than I feel, eyes a little more tired, laugh lines a little deeper, and I think, God, she made it. All the nights I thought I'd break, all the times I thought I was stuck, all the people who told me to stay for the kids, I made it. And my kids made it, too, into a home that feels safe, honest, warm. Do I wish Daniel had been different? Sometimes. But more than that, I'm grateful he wasn't. Because if he'd been just good enough, I might have stayed. And if I'd stayed, I'd still be that woman sitting in a police station at 2 a.m., holding her kids, begging for someone to come home. Now, we are home together, on our terms. We are enough, more than enough. So if you've ever wondered if you can survive it, the betrayal, the sleepless nights, the lies, this is your sign that you can. And one day, your kids will look at you the way mine do. Not as someone who got stuck in the mess, but as someone who was brave enough to climb out. That's the ending I choose. And if you're here, I hope you choose it too.